kids. Well, I guess I'll get started. Our fearless leader is going to be a tad bit late, so I'll be doing the introduction. So good evening and thanks for joining us today. Um, Today we have Miss Lindsay Wood, aka the Tiny House Lady. She's going to be talking about advocacy. First, I got to put my disclaimer out there. I hope it's okay with everybody. You're being recorded, and that will be on our website for people to do future viewings of the presentations. So we just want to make sure that's okay with you. If it's not, you know what to do. But first, since we're talking about advocacy, I found a quote that I wanted to read about education. Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. So with Lindsay educating us on advocacy, I thought that was appropriate since she'll be educating us this evening. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Lindsay. Thank you so much for being here. We know you have a busy schedule, so thanks for taking time to share with us your knowledge.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. So I love to hear where everyone's coming in from. If you want to add that in the chat, great to know where we're talking around the country, because what I'm going to talk about today is national. There are some areas in the country where there's been a lot of activity, and that has a lot to do with already existing opportunities. So it's always good to know. I see some familiar faces though. So I know we got California in the house. Bonnie out there in Florida, right, Bonnie? Yes, cool. And Nancy's from sunny Florida as well. Yay, I've actually got 2 people in my Go Tiny Academy that are in Florida, and I connected them, and I want to connect with more people. Shorty Robbins is one of the board members, and she's been working a lot on what's going on in Florida. So, you know, it's a big wide world of the United States. So knowing all the different legislation and what's going on around the country, I am not here to share about that specifically, but I'm definitely going to talk about what's been done and how to make more of it happen. All right, we got Georgia, Florida, California. I know Sharon's from California, so perfect, good. We got the full sides of the country represented here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is share my screen and dive right in. So big gratitude for NOAA for creating these educational opportunities, right? Oh, this always jumps. There we go. So thank you so much to everyone that's here, and also the crew that's making these happen, all the emails and the setup to be able to sign in and do all that stuff. You know who you are. So Tiny Talks, we're going to talk tiny, and today we're going to focus on a number of things. We're going to quickly review the 4 types of tiny homes, what I spoke about last time, because believe it or not, they have a lot of impact of how they relate to legalizing movable tiny homes. And that's what you're going to hear that term a lot, movable tiny home. We're going to cover the state of housing, what's going on in the US. This is from a US perspective, but I'm sure whatever's happening in the US, we've got it happening in other countries around the world. And in some cases where there's refugees and all kinds of things, even more. We're going to talk about advocating to legalize. Those 2 worlds are hand in hand. And then there'll be an invitation to join at the end. And then also a Q&A. Sorry, I did not add that, but we will do a Q&A at the end as well. So keep your questions. You can pop them in the chat. That way you don't have to forget them. And then we'll go back through the chat. So let's review. Tiny home is a marketing term. The world of building codes and building standards and zoning laws and all that does not have anything as a tiny home, because a tiny home could be living in a van, it could be living in a school bus, a tiny home could be a tiny home that we think about and see on YouTube, but when you walk into a local planner or your county or city, there is no known thing as a tiny home, either building standard or zoning practices currently. I'll just say that for record here. So there is a world of building standards, which everything relate to the tiny home and how it's built. Maybe it's a big home, maybe it's a tiny home. And then there's the world of like, well, how big is a tiny home? That is, a lot to be kind of a lot of opinions on that one. My opinion, my belief is anything 1,000 square feet or less. Because when you go back to 1950s, 1,000 square feet was the average size of home. Now it's 2,500 square feet. So if you're going anywhere 1,000 square feet or less, my book, you're going smaller. But building standards, also there's zoning laws. What is allowed on the land? So you've got the home that's built, and then there's the zoning law. What is allowed and not allowed on the land? Okay, so that's quick review with the building standards, zoning laws. Everything you're about to see on the next slide that we talked about more in depth last time is built in a factory and arrives on wheels. That is, we are having a renaissance in the factory-built housing, and this industry in the tiny home world is leading the charge on that, because most builders, whether they build in a parking lot next to their home, a warehouse, or a bigger warehouse or a bigger factory, it all is going to be built away from the location. So on-site building is what most of us are familiar with. You might be living in a home that was probably built on-site, unless you're living in a Sears home, which you could order in a catalog and have arrive and be built on-site. So it's not new, but there's been stigmas and all kinds of things associated. And this is in one snapshot, really the 4 types that are out there. The movable tiny home, not a standard yet. The NFPA, which is a recreational vehicle. ANSI, park model. IRC, built to state building code, and HUD, which is a national standard. Okay, so that's quick review on last week. 3 factors contributing to the current housing reality. Straight up, there's just not enough. I love this picture of her with her little shopping cart ready to buy her home. And, there's very few, like the toilet paper craziness that happened in the pandemic, right? And if we look at housing starts is the terminology used for when a home is for ground, like breaking ground. Isn't that interesting that our actual statistics of our national housing relates to on-site build? Because we know that when something breaks ground, it's built on-site. But what about all the factory built that's going to be happening? Okay, but we see it. We see the trajectory of where it's been going just since 2000, down and down and down, with a little bit of peak coming up, but considerably down from 2006. So it's just not enough housing. In fact, there's all kinds of reports out there, but I read just somewhere recently, 4 million homes are needed across the country. I know in California, 1.3 million are needed. So that's quite a big number. Number 2, affordability. Affordability comes in many different factors. It could be affordability based on the income of the area, and if you're above the income median or below it. But I like to use the one that really talks about how much of your income is spent on housing. So 30% of income or more spent on housing is where affordability index really starts to come into play. Some people are spending 50% of their income or more on housing. And what's even worse, some people are spending 80% of income. Now, if you're doing all that on your housing, and that also includes utilities, then what's left over for saving for retirement, medical expenses, surprises, the car broke down, now we have to get a new one, all kinds of things. This is really when we start putting our economic reality, we need to be much lower than 30% to have more of a standard way of living, to be able to, let's just imagine having a vacation. And we've all heard it, single mom working 3 jobs, who's taking care of the kids? They have to spend money on childcare while they go out and make money. All of those things, those all impact the ability to afford a home. And affordability, I like to call it attainability, because there's a lot of stigmas that are associated with affordable housing. What's affordable in LA is different than what's affordable in Tennessee. So that's number 2. Number 3, costs of materials have just gone up. And we've seen it in our own tiny home industry. What was once $60,000 tiny home is now your $80,000. What was $80,000 is now your $100,000 or more, all because of the material spike. There have been, some, coming down reality, but, once things go up in our country, they rarely go way down or go back to normal. You know, I know inflation's on the rise as well, gas prices, diesel prices, all of those things contribute to material prices on the rise. So I want to introduce to you the Tiny Home Industry Association. If you haven't been familiar with the organization yet, then this is a 501c6 nonprofit organization dedicated to advocating for regulation changes, to adhere to construction standards, so we approve the increased widespread use of permissible and permanent housing. As you know from some of those people that may have watched last week, we talked about recreational vehicle. Both the NFPA and the ANSI are temporary building standards for temporary living. And so when we put in the words permissible and permanent, that means that we're pushing forward to get them allowed in areas where they wouldn't be allowed because they're considered an RV or for temporary, and they're built to a temporary living building standard. So Thea has been really focused on California because California has been allowing accessory dwelling units, in addition to California, state of Oregon, and also the state of Washington. Dan Fitzpatrick, the president of Thea, just happens to live in California, happens to be in the city of Fresno, where the first movable tiny home in the nation was allowed. And that was because the accessory dwelling unit, this is the small home connected to the larger home. In this case, there's one scenario there, one there. It might even be a junior accessory dwelling unit. We also have that in the state of California, where say this home is connected to the garage and maybe there's a pass through. Let's just imagine there's a doorway through. You can now convert the garage, and that can be considered a junior accessory dwelling unit. There's obviously additions that have been going on for a long time, but the ADU that got passed in 2017 got further enhanced in 2020 by the state of California coming along and saying, okay, all of you jurisdictions that put up a fuss and didn't want these additional homes in the backyards as infill housing, you no longer can, you know, create barriers. You have to approve things in, I think, 90 days. HOAs cannot say no to ADUs. They can say what they're going to look like. For example, this home with the peaked roof has this certain siding, so too will the ADU have to look like that, versus having something that's super modern. So those are some of the rules that came around in 2020. So that was already in existence. So California, even though other states like Washington and Oregon, while they had the ADU ordinance, they didn't have the power and the must that 2020 delivered with, I'm sorry, you can't create, you know, really big barriers like expensive electrical hookups. You should not be paying as much to hook up this home as you will for a regular size home. So all those things were already in place. And all we needed to do is come along and say, you know what, your ADU needs to now be allowed as a movable tiny home. So it happened in Fresno first, but look at this list. Then it, you know, I don't even know exactly how. I think San Jose, big city. These top three right here, let's think about this for a moment. State of California, I know not all from California here, but the state of California is the fourth largest economy in the world. And in the state, the three cities that are the biggest population are Los Angeles, San Diego, and San Jose. In addition to San Jose, we've also got Santa Clara County. So we have a massive part of an economy that's fourth in the nation, just outbeats Germany and France as an economy. And we are allowing movable tiny homes in backyards to single family homes. However, I want you to point out there's a little asterisk, not an asterisk, but a pound sign here. California City had it officially. They're more in the desert. They're allowing you to put them as primary residences on actual single family land or single zone land. Thank you, thank you. Delivery of lunch. Probably do that later. So Placer County is also the other one that just approved movable tiny homes as ADUs, as cluster developments, and on certain zone land as standalone units, or otherwise known as primary residences. That's groundbreaking. That is a 388-page document with Placer County. The fact that they took their own standards and codes and made it movable friendly. Now, I will also share Santa Cruz County is looking at doing the same thing that Placer did. And guess what? So is Mendocino County, right where I live. So the fact that they led the charge first now allows us to look at more opportunities. Just like all these cities have moved forward, just these counties. Mendocino County is where I live. I was talking to one elected official. I wasn't talking to the one that brought it forward. And they actually brought it forward without me urging them because of what happened in other counties and cities. What I call that is a snowball effect, right? When things start popping around and happening, like, oh, well, then we can do that too. Because the supervisor wanted to bring it forward a few years back and got pushback from the other supervisors telling them that the state of California did not approve of movable tiny homes, which was a lie. And if you're not, informed enough, then okay, we're going to leave that lie. But then you started seeing all these cities happen and going, wait a minute, if all these cities and counties are doing it, why can't we? Boom, that happened a month ago. So we're making tiny possible. What I want to share with you, I'm going to jump out to the website and share with you this resource map. This is available to everyone, the public. There are certain things that are available only to members. But let's say we wanted to go around the country and take a look at Illinois. This map is a lot to manage, but I love that the people behind the scenes are putting the information for legislation, builders, and communities. So for example, let's see what kind of legislation is available. None there now. I already knew that because Illinois is not on the list. But you can find potential builders and communities. Something is actually there, so there we go. There's the builder. I'm not sure if there's any communities. I'll give you another example where it's more populated. There we go. So no communities, but we connected with Jill Canto of Search Tiny House Villages, which is awesome. She's been a single mom developing a nonprofit a long time ago, many, many years when I came into it. She was the one already doing it. So definitely check that out for areas that just may not be on the map yet. But now let's take a look at California. California is obviously, by what I just shared with you, going to have a lot more builders and legislation. Actually, not a lot of communities, which we need more, definitely. But here we go. This is where we get to see, for example, Oakland not only passed the ADU, but they also allow recreational vehicles. I'm not sure what SFs mean. Here we go, SF, single family dwelling, okay. Oh, as a single family dwelling. Oh, I did not know that. See, there's the new information. So I did not know that Oakland allows you to place a movable, I'm not sure if it's movable. Oh, vehicular residential facilities printed in all residential zones. So, wow, now we can add that to the list. But most of them are built to, or are based on, they're allowed in the backyard as an ADU, okay? So back to presentation. Now we get into legalizing tiny objectives. Who here is interested? I'm going to stop the share for a second just so I can see the chat. Who here is interested in legalizing in your area? Like you absolutely see a need for it. And just write the city or county or raise your hand. Okay, great. What city or county are you in? And if I'm not recognizing so if you're going to have a county or city, just say the state that it's in. And that way we can take a look because we are going to have an opportunity for us to dive in. All right, Florida, I love it. Any specific county that you see, because if you notice, we're doing this largely jurisdiction by jurisdiction. It's a lot of work, but we're doing it because local people don't like the state telling them what to do, right? They like to have their own special thing going on. This county is going to have a different thing than a city. Counties deal with much bigger landmass. From the mountains to the coast is really what Mendocino County involves. I love it. Citrus, New Jersey, Pinellas, Florida. Okay, so let me go back in, share my screen. Oops, that's not it. Sorry, the messy desktop, right? Okay, so really important to understand. I was one of the students this is Dan's. You notice Dan, copyright down there, Dan Fitzpatrick. I took these from his slides and embedded into mine. I also can say that I have been a student of his process, and I am the one that is also involved in the Mendocino County process. I'm so excited. It's been 3 years now since I've really been active at talking to my elected officials. Pretty much most of that time was met with crickets until recently. So it's really important to understand the governmental approval process, how to identify and use information and resources, and identifying approach and an approach to the government leadership. Okay, so it's really how to talk to local government officials. If you haven't done this kind of process before, other than like voting, right? You said we all submitted our ballots recently, but it really steps you into another realm. And it's going to start with, what's your elevator speech? What's your approach? Is it that we need more housing in this area? Is it that, single moms and dads aren't able to afford housing? We just already shared the housing issues. Most likely they're all over the country. Are you going to work through their staff? A lot of times, my brother or I know, or, someone knows someone, especially in smaller areas, even in bigger areas, but someone knows someone, right? The rule of 6 degrees of separation. We want to tap into that. If you've got someone like a planner or an elected official, you want to connect with them. Originally in Ukiah is like tiny compared to Mendocino County, just like anyone else, where you might have city of Tampa and the bigger county. City jurisdiction, county jurisdiction. If it's a small enough city and they may not have their own city council, they're going to probably be part of an unincorporated county. So really important, know where you're talking. Because I was talking to city planner, because the city mayor, Maureen Mahoran, she ended up becoming a supervisor. So I initially started talking to her when she was the mayor of the city of Ukiah, but the really big opportunity was Mendocino County. Now, city of Ukiah is still very viable. I happen to be sitting right now in a home in the city of Ukiah as a residence on my address, but actually in the county. I'm 4 blocks away from the actual city line. So super important to know who you're talking to so you can present your arguments, play to their base. They talking Democrat, they talking Republican. Dan talks a lot about, if you're talking to more of a Democrat, think sustainability, think, the ability to affect climate change with our housing choices. Republican, don't tell me what to do in terms of my government. And that is exactly what just happened at the elected official meeting of supervisors. They literally said those words. It was a 34-minute presentation, so I'm summarizing the most important part. Out of their mouth said, who's for us to choose? Who's for us to tell someone what size of home they should live in? I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna take that and make that like a meme. Okay. Be honest and forthcoming, right? Inform them on the pros and the cons. Do not blindside them. In fact, if you come up with the cons and have the rebuttal to the cons, that's super important. That means you've showing that you're doing your research. Be polite, differential. You do not want to piss off the people that eventually you want them to approve something that you're going to be bringing forward. So, and the whole thing of like, make your desired outcome their idea. It's not really hard in California because we have a demand of affordable housing called the Regional Housing Needs Allocation. All I'll say is that we just heard by the state of California that the RHNA numbers, the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, movable tiny homes can now check off the box, which is another bonus on top of everything. And we just heard that from Santa Cruz. So we're actually waiting for the actual letterhead from the state of California that says that exact thing, because every city and county is under pressure by the state for making things happen. Now, parlay that to your states, is a affordable housing allocation or something like that, happening at the state level. That would be something to look to, like in California. So I love this. Creative strategies, ask for advice. I don't know the process of working with supervisors. I've never really done it other than stand up at a meeting and say something for 3 minutes. That's literally my background. But you can ask them for advice, like, hey, if you were me, what would you recommend I do? How do we get this to an agenda? All kinds of things. So making them part of the process, because that's their world, right? There's me, I don't know what I'm doing. There's the people that have been doing this for 20 years. Get them engaged and asking them how to help you to help them. So educational resources, you can take, a snapshot of this. There's a lot of them. The Tiny Home Industry Association, in regards to movable tiny homes, is at the top of the list of organizations that are doing legalization practices across the country. State of Maine, the entire state had to define movable tiny homes because that industry was about to collapse. And Corinne was about to lose her business because some politicians really didn't know enough about her industry. She got in, did some information, got defined at the state level, the movable tiny homes, and now jurisdictions in the state can approve or deny allowing that available in the state. But the fact that it's a state level, that's amazing. So you can talk about, what is a tiny home, the benefits of a tiny home, affordability, we just talked about, zoning and land use issues. That's a big one. We are inheriting zoning laws from the 40s, from the early days, right? Times when not everyone was accepted. And everyone, whether it's your skin color, your background, your race, and your income. So we really want to also define what a movable tiny home is, give them ideas for infill housing, pocket communities in those areas where the land is just, maybe developers carved up this property and then this is sort of left aside. That could be perfect for a tiny home community. So we want to make arguments for the tiny home, movable tiny homes. What's really key is to follow these steps. And I kind of, was already doing a lot of research because I was already a part of THEA. I knew this. Then it's really strategizing. I kind of jumped all the way over to publicizing and testifying because Supervisor Williams in my area did a lot of the heavy lifting by bringing forward this whole concept of movable tiny homes as the champion. It's really finding and identifying the champion within the jurisdiction, whether that's inside as a staff or as an elected official. The elected officials are people that, you, your friends, the business owners have, voted into that office. So they work for you, right? We don't really think about that, but I want to remind everyone they work for you. We just have to approach it in a very specific way. And so speaking of approach, I want to highlight, what I've done is a long time ago, I created movable tiny homes for Mendocino County, and I got 118 likes. So it's not super active. I've not been really active, but I know that once, it's there, it's great. It's been around for a while. And I do want to share with you on the actual look of what it looks like to promote. Let's see. Oh, let me give you some background. So this just happened on election night, and they were about to go into talking about movable tiny homes.
I hope it's about the tiny homes.
Of course it is. Yes, I am Lindsay Wood, the Tiny Home Lady and a board member of the Tiny Home Industry Association. So the briefing document that led to the memorandum, thank you so much, Julia, for approving. And I am one that is very much in love with our riparian and corridors and willing to do whatever is.
Little backstory, there's a whole riparian corridor discussion right before me.
Needs to do to make sure that we take care of the land, but also address the housing crisis. So thank you so much, all of you, for taking a look at this and following in suit with what many other counties, including Humboldt County, as well as Placer County, leading the charge with incredible zoning and building standards opportunity. As someone who had my own tiny home built here in Ukiah, California, and I'm working on actually developing a company to actually build them here. The Ukiah High School is actually actively building 2 tiny homes with the CTE program. Training done by Tiny EDU. We have a lot of opportunity to train our youth and also house more people, offering worker force housing, agriculture housing, and so much more, so that people like myself who grew up here since 1980 can actually afford to live here. Thank you very much.
Oh, I was so nervous. Anyway, and this went on 34 minutes later. 1 out of the 5 supervisors said the word fad. They literally said the word fad in regards to tiny homes. And I loved it. I was like, oh, okay, we know who our person is that might say no to this. Okay, but that's okay. We only need 3 votes because there's 5 people, and we probably, I'm 99.9% sure that we'll get the 4 out of 5. And then the question is, do you want to be the 5th one that says no? And then he's representing an area on the coast that's actually in massive housing crisis issues. So see how all those things kind of play a role with each other. I'm going to take those 34 minutes. What's really great about opposition, though, is when you get the comments that they say, we want to be able to create the documents that actually speak to them. And when you go in to legalize somewhere, we've already been doing this dozens of times now. We know what kind of opposition's already coming up. You know, this is not the first rodeo. So that's the benefit of actually having opposition, is that we can address it. The FAD one is laughable. So wanted just to let you know, the THEA membership is $25 for individuals, $50 for nonprofit, and $100 a year for commercial. All of these prices I'm expecting are to go up in 2023. So if you're ever interested, get in now, because that is something that you will have support in terms of with it being in THEA. That is the QR code up there. And the benefits really are access to resources. There's an entire training. I'm only giving you a skim. Entire training on advocacy, how to advocate. Dan goes into a 3-part series. Each one is at least an hour to hour and a half long, on how to really do the research, talk to officials, and so on. The next webinar series that a lot of people love is for anyone that wants to buy land and place either a tiny home or a village on it. This is the webinar series because Dan's got 23 years in development. As a developer, he's done commercial development, residential development, all of those things. And then every month you get me, and we're going to be talking about these kind of things. Like just tomorrow night, no, where are we at? Tuesday? We are talking about this on Thursday. We're going to speak about United Tiny Homes in Arizona, and they're going to be featured. And then we're also going to feature the Go Tiny Showcase, which is called, I call it the double header. We're going to go from one to another and have a great dive into both a builder and then also different companies that are truly innovating the industry. So we always feature that. Now, I do want to shine on this brand new thing. I'm so excited. We have 2 people that have already sponsored their jurisdiction for $1,000. Usually these are builders, because when builders are in an area where they don't have the movable tiny home already allowed, then wouldn't they be the most to benefit from the area to, you know, become legal? So for example, Columbus, Ohio already has the ADU ordinance, which is really exciting. Amending an ADU ordinance is much easier than bringing in movable tiny homes where there is no ADU ordinance. I'll just say that right now. I really don't know the workaround where there's the, let's say there's a county where there's no ADU already. I don't know. That would be a great question to ask Dan. But areas where there's already accessory dwelling units allowed, then for that $1,000, you get a custom briefing document that goes to that city or county. Strategy call with me, because we're going to want to know where you're at in the process of understanding advocacy. Strategy call then with Lindsay, Dan, and an elected official or staffer, or ideally bonus points for both, because those are when things start happening. And that's exactly what happened with us. We had an elected official on the line. Then the next follow-up call was with the elected official and the planner. And now you saw what just happened, 34 minutes. It was because they got this briefing document. In fact, Supervisor Williams made sure to thank county planner for bringing back the information so quickly. And it was because we were behind the scenes feeding her. So she didn't look at a blank page with a cursor blinking, right? That's not a place where a lot of planners want to start. They want to start with something already fueled by experts like us, and then they take it from there. So this is happening. Reach out to me. These are all my social connections. Facebook, Instagram is Tiny Home Lady. TikTok is Go Tiny Now. And YouTube is, I'll have to put that in the link, but it's Tiny Home Lady. And I do want to give you all, a free gift like I did last time. I just added in Legalize. If you want to schedule a 15-minute Legalize or tiny home discovery call with me, go ahead and QR code that, and I'll put this in the chat. And now I'm curious to know who would be interested in talking about their specific. How much time do we have? What are we at? We go till 3? Oh, Yulian, you're muted.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
I was just curious, do we have about 5 minutes to work with an individual about their specific area?
Yeah, you can take about 5 minutes.
Okay. Who would like to do that? Where do you live? Where's Citrus, Dallas, Tarrant? Someone come on screen and.
Okay. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Catherine.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I'm-
Thank you so much.
It's so nice to talk to you again. We spoke about a week or so ago, just before the hurricane hit.
Got it.
I'm actually from Pinellas County, and I reached out to a gentleman who had started a Facebook group in Pinellas County and was wanting to make a Pinellas County group. And at this point, I'm still trying to get in touch with the actual zoning people, because I've learned that he doesn't know the right questions to ask to get the right answers. And so they're just telling them no, when really it's, you got to know the footprints and the ins and outs. But I really would like to help them to have a development in Pinellas, because we do need it. And it is important. And in this gentleman, he's thought a lot about different ways, but I would really I would like to help, because that's all I want to do is help others,
Absolutely. So the very first thing I did, just as for everyone, so whatever Catherine's doing, let's all give a round of applause. Click your little reactions, hearts, bursting confetti, all that stuff. Okay. So with regards to Pinellas County, is this the county? Am I saying it right?
Yep, you
Okay.
sure are.
I already went up here and typed in accessory dwelling unit because it's the lowest hanging fruit for any county or city. What we've got in the states, California, Oregon, Washington, statewide. Then I've heard, more like pockets, like I just heard Columbus, Ohio had the ADU ordinance, but it doesn't mean that Ohio, the state of, approved ADUs statewide. So it's going to
Right.
come more in pockets. The good news is we've got Atlanta, Denver, Chicago, Columbus, Ohio. It already exists out there. And then all the states, the county government should have no issue finding an accessory dwelling unit ordinance to add to their, rules and regulations. Because a lot of
Okay.
times, it is what Dan says. I take a lot from what Dan says because Dan's been in it for 45 years.
Uh-huh.
Government is not entrepreneurial. They're
Right.
going to copy something. So what you're going to want to find is the ADU. I think, this is the part where I love how we started with the challenging one. If someone said, I'm just going to use a city of Bakersfield, there's the Kern County has not approved movable tiny homes, and neither has the city of Bakersfield. But I know that the whole state of California has, so all we're going to do is follow suit and approve and amend ADUs. So I guess
Well,
I turned to
Hillsborough County actually has, so that's what we're hoping, is to use Hillsborough County as a reason why we should do it if it's not already available.
okay, so accessory.
They
Can't
actually
even
allow
type it.
tiny homes on wheels in Hillsborough.
Okay, and do you know how they pass that? Do they allow them in backyards as ADUs? Do they allow them as primary residences?
All I could say honestly, I've reached out to the lady. There is a tiny home community in Ruskin, around a lake.
What I can say in regards to communities, what's so nice about Texas and Florida, you already have a lot of more RV zoned property. For
Yes.
example, let's just go here. LoopNet is one of my favorite little places, realtor.com, all those great things. We can type in, I was just looking at this, so I know where it is, Tampa, Florida. We're gonna go there. Then we're gonna look at property type, manufactured housing, mobile home, I think also RV park. I know it, whoops, sorry. I think this was, that's a new one. There was one called in Gibsonton. I know for sure it was there, but anyway, this is one of the places you can go to find land that's already been deemed, for RVs, mobile homes, all of that. That's the easiest, lowest hanging fruit to create a community. But for people that want to do infill in the backyard of a single family, that's where the accessory dwelling unit ordinance is traditionally what that's brought in, and then it's amended as a movable tiny home now allowed as an ADU.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Sure, absolutely. And that's, good for everyone that, New Jersey, anyone that's not in states or counties or cities that already have the accessory dwelling unit. Robin, is there anything that you've observed otherwise to that? I'm just asking my Floridians.
Well, in Florida, we are kind of a special case. You know, the ANSI product, the ANSI 119.5, is really not designed for full-time living. It's for seasonal housing. In California, basically, they have just such a need for housing that they're allowing people to live full-time as an accessory dwelling unit, or some single-family residents, but mostly it's accessory dwelling units in California to supplement their housing problem. In Florida, we have a lot of parks that have park models in them, and they're lived in full-time. I mean, I don't know whether the legislatures just kind of turned their head, but in reality, when they were built, they were built as seasonal and temporary housing. But in Florida, people buy them. The snowbirds come in, and then they buy these units and put the accessory, or put ANSI products, park models on there, and then they retire. They move into them full time. I know there's other states like Arizona that have passed ordinances saying that you can live in a park model RV full-time as a full-time residence. Most places, a lot of places don't go with that, especially North Carolina is one that comes to mind, that they say, no way, Jose, you can't live full-time in any RV of any kind. It has to be a modular or a HUD home.
It's true. The answer is usually it depends. Like, can I allow, can I move in? I buy land. Can I? The answer that follows is 2 words. It depends. And it always comes down to, is the jurisdiction movable tiny home friendly? Are there, mobile home parks? In fact, I just looked it up. The state of Florida has over 1,600 mobile home parks. I grew up going to my grandma's that lived in a manufactured home community. I just heard something the other day, anything from, I think it's 76 and earlier is a mobile home. Anything 76 and on is a manufactured home. There was sort of a, different. Now, are there mobile homes still in existence that people are living in? Absolutely. Are they built as well as the manufactured homes? No. And on top of that, like I mentioned last week, our industry of tiny homes are building closer to state building code, right? We're just using all of these standards because of those pesky little wheels. But we're seeing a big change, in terms of housing as we know it. The most important thing is the more homes built in factories certified by NOAA, the better, because that's where the standard and the quality and the control. I mean, just think if you're going to work and it's 100 degrees out, but your climate control is bringing you down to like 75 inside a factory, or opposite is true. It's 20 degrees out and now you're in a factory that's like 65, you need a little jacket, way different than on-site building construction. And because of housing prices going up, because of material prices going up, all fingers point the direction of factory built. It's just, we have to understand the relationship of where factory built has come from and the direction we're going. Absolutely. So awesome. Anyone have any other questions around, advocating and legalizing in your area? Anyone wanting to do it? Make it happen? Thank you, Catherine. She's out there doing it. It is a labor of love.
It is.
And that is why we mostly, here's the other cool thing, another idea. You might want it, but if you know of a builder that's in an area, I'll answer that question. If you know of a builder in the area, that builder is so busy building, but you might be a really good, partner for that builder. Like, hey, the fact that you've got a business, maybe the 2 of us team up together because your business is going to benefit once this thing passes, and we need to go through all the processes to make it happen. There's
They
more of
think me-
a,
They look at me like I'm from Mars. Like for
the
real. And I'm
builder's
like,
or the jurisdiction.
no, the builders, because I am a coordinator, and that's what I enjoy doing, is saying, hey, you got that, and hey, over there, let's come together and let's make this happen. And
Yeah.
but they look at me like I'm from Mars, like They're the people that are the builders that have money, that are affluent and in my area, they're like, who would live in 300 feet? Oh my God. And I'm all
Wait,
like,
the
what?
builders, no, you mean contractors are building regular size houses?
Just people and just people that are developing in my
Oh.
community that I try to talk to about, you know,
But don't talk to
possibly.
them.
I'm learning
Don't-
that. I just talked to
don't
someone,
talk-
the next
because
person.
That's a big bubble pop on I'm talking about tiny home builders, not the manufacturers, the Champion, the Clayton, they're already built into those HUD things. We're talking the ones like movable roofs. They're in Florida. Now, granted, they could be really busy, but they're gonna meet with you and be like, I mean, Mike Cheatham has a successful business there. I don't know where he places them. A lot of movable tiny homes are getting placed under the radar, going out of state, you name it. But if you could meet with more of the tiny home builders, then you would be met more with, support. So, if you want to share with the group, you can put your email in the chat or email me, thetinyhomelady@gmail.com, or schedule a 15-minute call and I'll make those connections. I usually do that right there. I pick up the phone and start calling people.
Well, that
know,
would really, really help a
now.
lot of people because my mother always said, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So, and
And in
I'm
this
out.
industry, it's both, right? In this industry, literally, you guys, it is who you know, and then you bring what you know to their awareness. And then you follow through the political process and you don't give up. I mean, I literally was seeing one of the supervisors every time hanging out. I'd see her hiking and she just wasn't biting. I'm like, hey, like, come to my home. I did everything. I felt like I did everything. But then
Right.
one supervisor, one over in the district that I'm in, lo and behold, just did it without even knowing
Wow.
me. So then I found the right champion. And sometimes it might be going through and looking, that's part of the research, looking at what they're all about. So one of the things, Nancy, what has been the toughest area to win over date? Los Angeles has been one of the longest, but because they were already battling against the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. We have not dealt with too many places that don't already have the ADU ordinance. So that is going to be the sticky challenge with people other than RV park, mobile home park, that is your low hanging fruit in like states like Florida and Texas where it already exists. That's why there's so many more communities than in California. We don't have land is obviously more expensive here. There have been, and they're mostly on like an hour out of city and away from the coastline. You don't see too many, what is it? The one in Oceanside in the middle of 1 block from the beach, they're not for sale because they make so much darn money. But ones that are hour out in the mountains, whatever, they're for sale. Let's see. Any other question and why makes sense? And I wanted to mention really quickly to Susan about Texas. Texas is known to be one of the states that all of their counties, except for areas where they're close in suburban, like think of like the county that's connected to Austin. Well, Austin's growing so big, it's, bumping over like county board, all those things. They're just growing like crazy. But most of the counties in Texas are unrestricted. I drove through a community in San Antonio and you could live in an RV on land, no problemo. So it is amazing there in Texas. You see communities, and then I even heard where I think under 400 square feet is where you don't have to pay property tax on the home. That's why I don't know exactly the rule, but there's a reason why a lot of them are $399.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Unfortunately, I got a phone call just as you mentioned my name, so I missed some of what you said, but I do not want people to have the wrong impression. It is in no way easy in Texas. It is very difficult. You can't be in cities, and even in rural areas, you still have the same septic requirements and all of that. So I'd be happy to fill anybody in on what I know and what I know about specific areas, but that just sounded a little bit like all the people in Europe that think that anybody in the United States can just buy a tiny and live wherever they want.
It all comes back to
Yeah,
it
there's
depends.
one place.
Yeah, I happen to stay in San Antonio.
Yeah, the Lake
in a
Dallas
community-
tiny house is wonderful, but that's really good for like the 10 people who live there.
Right, yeah, yeah. So it'd be awesome if state like Texas approved ADUs in backyards statewide. It might be jurisdiction by jurisdiction that has to do it. I really don't know the history of like, did a jurisdiction approved in California before it went statewide? I don't know all that history. But yeah, good point. What we think of another state, I mean, I just have to say, when I was in Texas, I was able to find more communities than you can ever find in California. So when I say from my perspective, there's very few communities, but there's many more. And I don't mean just tiny home resort communities where it's more of a, you know, like a hotel. But we were staying near Lake Conroe and we're like, oh my God, there's a tiny home village here. Unbelievable. So, but I get you. Everyone's got their challenge. We just got to figure out. It's really important to figure out if you want your local city or county to get approved, then just zero in on that versus getting, you know, distracted by all the shiny balls, you know, that are around you. Yeah. On the map. Okay. Thank you. I will give you the map. It's on the Thea. And then I'll also give you on how to join Thea. And if you find that there's not information on the resource map in your area, either they just haven't gotten that information because there's pretty much a volunteer force that are doing it. So there's the map. And then.
Well, Lindsay,
join
we're going to
Thea.
have to wrap things up here.
Cool.
Everybody put her in the chat, you know, good job, that kind of a thing. And then Leanne, you've got some announcements at the end for tomorrow night, I think. And then we'll kind of go from there. And anybody in Florida, there is going to be a tiny house show this weekend in Sarasota at Siesta Key. So just wanted to make that announcement.
Thank
I
you.
want to go. Yeah, so Nancy is thanking you for the wealth of knowledge, which I could plug into you and download. Yeah, so thank you, Lindsay, so much for taking time to spend with us and give us this education. Appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. Tomorrow night, we have Scott Banta, who will be actually talking about tiny house development. He's developing a tiny house community in Volusia County here in Florida. And he has a wealth of knowledge. So tune in tomorrow night for that. Thursday night, as you know, is our inspector chat where you can ask our inspectors any questions and they will give you their best answers, code standards, the codes that we inspect to. So anyway, you guys, oh, okay. I saw something in the chat. Thanks, Lindsay.
I'll just get my information.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. So with that, I think that's it. Robin, did you have anything else? Hope you guys have a great night and we'll see you on the flip side.
Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Lindsay. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody. Have a good night.